Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Fantasy Football Expo podcast series. Of course, I'm Bob Lung with the Fantasy Football Expo, wearing my Hellfire Club because I think Stranger Things 5 is coming out this summer. At least we hope so. Anyway, my good friend to the right is the one, the only Nate Cheatham from IDP Plus. Nate, how's it going? Love the Fallout Boy shirt. I know you just went and saw them. How was the concert, man?
Very happy to be here, and it was an amazing concert. I had not seen them yet, but they were one
Oh.
of my favorite bands in high school, um, and so it was an experience for me for sure. And yeah, I just happened to be wearing this shirt and happy to do it.
Now, see, when I go see my favorite bands from high school, they're in their 70s. So it's a whole different story. But anyway, I regress. But yeah, thanks for being on here, Nate. You've been a big part of this expo for a long time, not just on behalf of IDP Plus. For those who don't know, this man creates this amazing website every year. He knocks himself out of the park with the amazing changes, the ease of use. So anybody out there who loves this website and loves how easy it is to do, make sure you thank this man here. But Nate, we're here to talk more about the IDP Plus. But before we get that into that, let's
Mhm.
talk about your humble beginnings here in the fantasy football world. When did it start for you? When did somebody introduce you to this wonderful game that we love? Year, how many years you've been playing? What did you get started in? And then we'll lead that into your IDP obsession.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very easy to understand my IDP obsession because I started off in fantasy football, and really, it was in football in general in 2009.
Okay.
My best friend, I guess that's the term to use. He's also on Twitter in the fantasy football space. Johnny the Greek, and him and I just hit it off at work, and we became friends. And he introduced me to football, and part of the football that they did was fantasy football, and the style of fantasy football was IDP. It
So
was a
you were there from the get go, man. That's
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah.
Very
Um,
cool.
so it was an intoxicating place to be because we had like three or four TVs going. We had plenty of alcohol, all of the wings, and everyone was tearing into each other over their fantasy league. So
I love it. I love it. So were you? It was offense defense with IDP involved. Okay,
yeah.
that's cool. That's very cool. And long. I mean, you were. I always tell people I played fantasy football long before fantasy football was cool. You were basically playing IDP long before IDP was cool because that's kind of really just been what I'd say last 5 or 6 years that's really kind of exploded onto the scene as a force to be reckoned with in this industry.
Yeah, that's a pretty fair statement. I know that when we were playing, it was hard pressed to find anyone else that like knew what it was or
Mm-hmm.
wanted to play it. Um, and this was before I wasn't really big on Twitter at that point.
Sure.
Didn't know anything about the fantasy football industry as a whole. I had just gotten in and got my feet wet, and now my friend and his group, they had been playing fantasy football and IDP since paper and pencil back in the
Oh
90s.
wow.
So
Well, yeah. Let's say, what site did you use back in 2009? Was MF the MFL? Did it have Dynasty or IDP back then? Or
we used Yahoo.
okay,
um,
Yahoo did it. Okay.
yeah, I grew up on Yahoo essentially. And what's funny is I remember when Yahoo first got into fantasy sports back in, I was in high school at the time, like 2003,
Mm-hmm.
2004.
Yeah.
Um, and I had initially tried like fantasy basketball and fantasy NASCAR. Um,
Still a thing. Yeah.
yeah, and I was just like, this is interesting, but I have no idea what's going on, and I just stopped doing it. So when they were like fantasy football, like I had already had like a little bit of understanding in Yahoo of like how to set your lineups and stuff. So I took to it pretty quickly, and I actually I ended up launching my own league the second year that I started watching football, and that year I won the tournament. I won the championship,
Nice.
mainly out of boredom because I was going to college at the time. I was registered for psychology courses, and I was bored to death.
Yeah,
So I just
I
tinkering
understand.
through my lineup.
I got you. I got you. Yeah, there was a peak. I always tell people there was a peak in the fantasy world. I don't know if I say peak. There was a time when they created fantasy for everything, and I think it was right in that mid 2000s, like when
Mhm.
Yahoo, like you said, the NASCAR, golf. But my favorite was when we found and I think it was on I don't know if it was CBS or Yahoo, one of the two sites, did fantasy bass fishing. So just like the golf, you pick your top five fishermen of the week and
Mhm.
whatever yo dunk tournament was going on, and Billy Joe, Jim Bob, and and these you we were trying to find research for
Wow.
bass fishermen, and it was just fun because we didn't nobody had a clue
Mhm.
who was good, who was not, and but it was like everything was, they were just trying to grab at every straw possible to see whether it would do. So now, of course, we're basically down to football, baseball, basketball, hockey, NASCAR, golf.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Obviously, a lot less, but no, it's amazing the transition we've gotten to. So, talk about you obviously started at the IDP level, which
Yep.
most don't. So it makes obviously very good sense that IDP guys and now IDP plus. So talk about that transition when you made that jump into this IDP guys, and then talk about a little bit about the transition into the IDP plus that you guys are doing.
Yeah. So initially, our brand was just myself and my best friend who got me into football, got me into fantasy. Him and I became roommates, and we talk fantasy all the time. And during that period of time, I was starting to get into the sports content creating community. I came about it through the Detroit Lions, who are my team, and
Mm-hmm.
so I joined a podcast writing team. Essentially, is the way to put it. And I was working through finishing up a degree in journalism, um, and so I had this background with editing and creating articles and that kind of stuff. So I rose up to be the editor of that website, and so I was trying to think of like what could I do myself, because like I'm just kind of promoting other people's stuff, helping other people. Like what can I do for my own thing? And so Johnny and I started talking about, well, why don't we produce a podcast? And when we came up with the topic, we gravitated towards IDP right away because at the time, you talk about how it's only been 5 years since IDP's really become mainstream. We're talking about this was back getting close to 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
When we were having these conversations, there was nobody around
Yeah.
talking about IDP. And so we were like, okay, so IDP is going to be our niche. That makes sense. So how are we going to name this? And we're like, okay, we are talking about IDP and we're two guys. So we're going to be the IDP guys. And that is all of the
Brilliant
thought we put
marketing.
into that.
Brilliant marketing.
you know, um, and so, we launched into that. We got it rolling, and it's taken us to the point where we're at now. And then in the last 2 to 3 years, we've just been expanding past the IDP. We do that really well, but there's so much more out there. And IDP even is starting to expand beyond just fantasy football. It's getting into sports betting, it's getting into, just other aspects of the football, uh, you know, areas that we're also exploring. And so we wanted to create a brand, and we wanted to make the perfect jump into a new branding that can exemplify, where we're going, but also show where we've been. And then also be inclusive because there's more than just two guys now part of this brand. And so we looked at, what is that? And we came up with IDP plus because you can put anything after that plus and that can be the branding. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, IDP plus offense, IDP plus Scott Fishbowl, IDP plus the Fantasy Expo, like, and it can just encompass like, okay, this is part of our brand that's dedicated to this topic,
Mm-hmm.
and we've really leaned into that, and if you're on Twitter and you're following us, you can definitely see how we've over the course of 6 months really changed our messaging and our style and everything, and we put a lot of time and effort into building that and fine-tuning it.
No, it's awesome. And like you said, you guys have been the leaders in IDP. And now you're going to be taking that to the plus range. I know one of the things we've talked about is you're heading towards IDP plus sports betting, which is super cool. And obviously that's where a lot of this is going. And let's, like you said, let's be honest, there's heavy prop betting that can be done on the IDP side. And maybe a lot of people, I mean, I knew it, but if somebody, I don't think
Yeah.
about when I go look at prop bets because I'm looking at offense because that's what I know. But certainly there's money to be made on that side as well. And if you got the right tools, which you guys have created or are creating, that you guys can help lead people to making money on the IDP side of prop bets. And a win's a win. I don't care if we're betting on whether grandma's going to make it up and down the steps or over under. We'll see. But but
Yeah.
you can bet on anything. So yeah, I think it's great. I applaud you guys. You guys have been a big part of the expo for a long time. So let's kind of head towards that. Talk about your guys' experiences that you've had in your past here with the various years. This is this will be 4. This will be 3. You weren't were you at the first one?
So we weren't at the first one.
Okay.
That was 2019,
Yes.
if I
Right.
remember.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, that was like 70 guys in the
Yeah. Yeah.
Double Tree bar for the weekend.
Well, actually, no. We actually had a little place in the cultural center, and we had our own stage. But
Oh, okay, there you go.
it was still only 75 people. Like I said, there's the people that I remember being there as Jorge Edwards had just started Fantasy and Frames.
Mhm.
He was right beside me in the booth. Bob Harris was there. Curtis Patrick, I think, was there with Roto Viz. And beyond that,
Yeah.
I can't remember too many others. We didn't have a lot of the big boys there other than Bob. Bob was there, and we were honored to have him there. And he's been, but yeah, I call them my few OGs that were there at the beginning. But yeah, I don't know.
Not that
I kind of really represent 2021 as the start of it, even though we actually had a start. So.
Yeah. So, I remember hearing about the 2019 Expo and being like, that's a really cool concept. 2020 hit, and it was like, this really, all of that just sucked. And
Yeah.
so when 2021 came around and it was like, hey, here's an opportunity to go somewhere. Our brand is starting to, mature and go places. What happens if we take it on the road? And so, I believe, yeah, I ended up reaching out to you. I sprung for a VIP booth because I was like, all right, like if we're gonna show up, like let's not just be like small fish in the big sea and like in the corner and no one likes us. So we got the VIP booth,
And you guys had the best booth by far. It was. In fact, I'll tell people if you go to the website and you go to the page where you're going to buy a booth, just before you go into the section to buy a booth, there's a picture of Nate and Keith Gillian, who's his printer. The banners and I mean, it's just amazing. And the funny thing is they had all that, and everybody else was like, maybe had one banner, maybe that was it. Most people didn't have banners, and these guys were just like, look at this, people. So
that
yeah,
was
you
the
guys
whole
definitely
thing.
made a statement.
Yeah, that was the whole thing. Was we didn't want to show up and look small.
Yeah.
And I'm a graphic designer. Keith, who at the time was a business partner of mine, owned a printing company in
Still
Canton.
does. Yeah. In
So
Canton.
it just made sense to really kind of go big, and we developed that concept, and that was really cool. That was really fun. And the story that I always like to tell is that we had been winding down our podcast. So like we started as a podcast and kind of transitioned into this website and started promoting, finding other writers and stuff. But that core podcast was ending because my friend, he got his career going, and so he got really busy. I had graduated college. I was starting my own business, so I was getting really busy. So we just couldn't find time to record, and so instead of like belaboring it and kind of like not like it just the quality going down and being infrequent, we
Right.
said let's do it, but for a final season, and we wrapped it up going um, into that year, that football season. We finished it during the summer, and so there were 3 or 4 people that came up, and they said, "We just listened to your last episode. We've been listening to you for years."
Wow.
And we're really, we understand, but we're kind of upset that you guys are done. And I was just so like taken aback because like I've come out here, I had no expectations of like meeting anyone who even knew who I was. That's why I show up and like kind of like they call it peacocking, um, to like draw attention to me, and then for people to know who I was and had been fans of the show for so
hmm
long. It just kind of showed like, oh wow, like okay, this I'm not actually as insignificant as I think.
No, yeah, I hear you, man. I've been there for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. So that was year one, and I was hooked. Meeting everyone. Man, I was so like timid to like go up to people. I remember seeing like Scott Fish in the
hmm
hallway, and being like, oh my god, do I go talk to him, like, or do I let
Right.
me hang over here and be cool about it?
Yeah.
Or like Joe Bryant. There were a couple other guys where I was just like kind of scared to talk to them. And then we did the IDP panel, and we packed the house.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there were standing room only. We put together a show. It was um, Jorge Edwards. Oh man,
Davenport.
Gary Davenport, and then why do I want to say Matt? It
Nate
was
Markham, was Nate in
Nate
that?
Nate Markham.
Okay.
So it was the 4 of us, and we put on a show just talking about IDP and how to
hmm
get ahead and answering questions, and it was a packed audience, and like that was just it was really cool to see all of that happen, and so we've been going every year since, and have no intentions to not go.
Speak about going year after year. Did you? I, because there's people who maybe are going for their second time, maybe their first time,
Hmm.
maybe even their third time. The one thing we try to pride ourselves on, and I say we because you help me in this, is that we don't want each year to be the same.
Hmm.
We don't want somebody going, oh, I went last year. It's the same old thing.
Yeah.
Tell people about the processes that we go through and others go through to make sure, yeah, there may be similar events and similar things going on. But even if we did exactly the same events, talk about just that experience of every year is different because every year you meet new people, you meet new products, you meet,
Yeah.
because again, I can say it all day long and everybody's like, whoa, it's your thing. But talk about it from your perspective of what you've seen be different, same, better, that kind of stuff from a vendor, outsider fan
Yeah.
who, you know,
Yeah, so I mean the biggest thing to say is this is a tough industry, and for the people that come as vendors, as booths, like I don't know what the statistics are on it, but I can only imagine there's only a certain amount that actually make it year over year. So they come in and, they're selling their product, and they you bring enough of an audience that, sometimes it's just a matter of like, it's a tough industry, and so there's always a new group of exhibitors, which
Hmm.
means for us, those are new opportunities of partnerships.
Hmm.
So as an exhibitor, as a brand, I we like the biggest aspect for us is that business to business networking. So going in and looking at, okay, who are the new companies, who are the new up and comers, because you're going to have, yeah, there's going to be a certain amount that maybe they drop off, and then there's going to be a certain amount that advances and gets bigger, and
Hmm.
so you're trying to network and see, like who it is that you can do something with, whether it's as simple as like, oh, I'm going to go on their podcast,
Right.
break out of my bubble, from the fanalist perspective.
Hmm.
There's, you come in and you could be talking to someone who brings you on as a writer or content creator.
Hmm.
There's that aspect. And so, one year you come in, you're fresh and you're just taking it in. The second year you're maybe looking for a job, so to speak. And the third year you're coming in from a whole new realm of being part of the brand and doing that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and then it's just the different nuances that you, Bob Lung, put into this thing. So, you know, um, last year was the first time in the bubble.
Hmm.
So,
The bubble.
bu-
The dome.
the dome, the bubble.
Yeah.
Um, the first 2 years were at the DoubleTree,
Hmm.
there that I was involved. So, one year was in the basement, one year was on the first floor, and you know that changes the dynamics of things. It's been expanding, it's been getting bigger,
Hmm.
so more things to do, more things to see, and then there's the outside stuff that happens. The football guys icebreaker that is a poker tournament slash party that starts at the beginning. That just came around. That was 2 years ago
Two
that
years ago.
started.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and so the first year it was at the DoubleTree, and then they moved it to the M Bar, and that so there's always these things that come in that, while it's a lot of the same stuff, there's new faces, new people, new opportunities, and then there's the old stuff getting better.
Hmm.
So,
Cool.
last year's draft night out was amazing, but kind of chaotic. This year, I think it's going to be very well put together.
Yeah. Right. Because yeah, Seth just kind of was thrown into it, and now he's got his system down. But also talk about it from for the fans that are coming
Yeah.
in, learning something new every year. I always say I learn a ton of stuff. I learned from you guys. I learned, whether it's Bob Harris, whether it's Howard Bender, JJ Zachariason was here this year, last year. There's always something new to learn too. That's the other thing I love about it is that I can come there and I'll stand and watch, one of the panels and I'm like, oh, yeah, good
Hmm.
information. I didn't know, but didn't think about that. Didn't really, So
Exactly.
talk about that too for those who are just coming as fans, not out there to get a
Yeah.
job, but just what they can learn and what they can get out of the massive amounts of different genres and knowledge base.
Well, I got to say, we've got probably at least 50 to 100 different analysts that are coming in, and they're going to populate the booths, the stages, the breakout areas. So like,
Mm-hmm.
if you live and breathe fantasy football as a fan, and you're just, also listen, this is the beginning of the season for a lot of people. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
is, for me, this marks, like, screw the Hall of Fame game. This is the point where it's like, okay, football is coming.
Yeah,
back.
right. Yeah.
So it's like that inauguration of like we're getting into the season, and we're getting serious. So you come in and you're able to hear strategies, analysis, content. You could be in your car listening to SiriusXM, or you could be in Canton, Ohio, and hearing it, with them on the
Standing in front
stage.
of SiriusXM, doing it live in the dome.
Yeah, yeah, and then talk to the analysts afterwards, one on
Hmm.
one, and introduce yourself and get a chance to say hi and show how much of a fan you are. Um, there's so much of that information that's through this whole weekend,
Hmm.
from one-on-one conversations that you can have, um, at the parties, the speaking events. Now we've expanded it to also have Saturday for sports betting, so like
Yep,
there's
that's
going to
kind
be
of
all
cool.
of that information that's going to be out there. And then go booth to booth and just talk to people and get like special promo codes to get into
Right,
their website, or talk to them, or get the handouts that they're giving. And
right.
um
And the
for
swag bag that's full
yeah,
of all of these coupons and
right.
promo codes and stuff and swag. And yeah, it's yeah, as a fan, even if you're not deep into fantasy, you don't have to be into fantasy like us.
Yeah.
You don't have to be. But let's say you're just not doing well in your leagues, or maybe you haven't won, or you haven't made the playoffs. Come and learn, because you have at your access every one of the top names.
Hmm.
The only person that won't be there will be Matthew Berry. Sorry. He has a job for NBC Sports. He has to travel to games. But trust me, all of his people were there from Fantasy Life. And like you said, everybody else you can even name or think of is there or be represented in some way. So check that out. So,
Yeah. And if you're just a football fan too,
yeah,
you're at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Like
right.
during that time, spend a couple hours or a half a day at the Hall of Fame itself,
Mm-hmm.
and take in all of that history. I know that I go almost every year and just walk through it, and it's enough that you need. Like I can't do it in one weekend, so I have to do it over multiple years.
Right.
When
Yeah.
I travel into town.
Yeah. There's a lot to get through. So awesome. Well, Nate, thank you again for being a part of this. Tell everybody where they can find you and your team, and then we'll take it out from there.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. At Nate Cheat, that's my handle. Generally, I don't tweet a lot of fantasy stuff. I'm not really an analyst. I'm more of the guy behind the scenes, make everything happen for IDP Plus. So follow at IDP_plus to get all of that content coming in. Um, Subscribe to our website, idpplus.com, and also our YouTube channel. We have 3 videos coming out a day, so there's a lot of content coming out from that team. And if you are interested in becoming a creator, need help, that is kind of my specialty. Being in this business for so long, I'd like to help people get better at what they're doing. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome.
So at Nate Cheat on Twitter.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you, Nate, for being here. Thank you to you and the rest of the IDP team, IDP Plus team. It's going to be tough for me to not say IDP guys all the time. IDP Plus team,
Yep.
for being a part of this year's expo again. Of course, you can find me at Bob_Lung. The expo is at the FF Expo. And as soon as I hit this button, it's going to go to a page that's got all the places you can follow us at. But most importantly, go and get your tickets. TheFantasyFootballExpo.com. Get the tickets, get signed up, get registered, come and enjoy. We'd love to see you there. So for Nate Cheatham, I'm Bob Long. Take care. God bless. We'll